Hello and welcome to Heat Networks with Chirpy Heat. I'm Christine from Chirpy Heat. This is the podcast for housing providers navigating all things heat networks, where we hear from guests who share their practical tips and guidance and insights on areas like compliance and technology and heat network management. And this is to support you in running your heat networks efficiently and confidently. And today we have Chirpy Heat Client Relationships Consultant Millie Hurault with us. Hi, Millie.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you.
Good. So we're very lucky that we're going to be talking to Millie about the webinar that she did last week. We're going to be talking about heat network priorities for the financial year 2026-27. This is one of our free webinars Chirpy Heat offers, and it was very popular as I understand it.
Very
And
popular.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very interesting. Yeah, brilliant topic to cover though as we
Yes,
go into the new year, the new financial year. And yeah, so I think it'd be great to hear from yourself just some of the key points that come out of that webinar, and also maybe some of your own personal reflections as well, if that's
perfect.
okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, could we first of all maybe recap on where we are at the moment with the regulatory developments?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think everyone within the heat network sector will appreciate it's been a really, really busy time thinking about sort of regulatory developments. Obviously, Ofgem took their role in January of this year. We recently had the consultation, the HNTAS consultation, so the technical standards, that closed last Wednesday, so the 15th of April. And that obviously gained a lot of kind of conversation and traction from, especially from social housing providers, looking at some of the things that they're advising might come out in sort of HENTAS. Consultation wise, we are still waiting for the guaranteed standards of performance response to be released in terms of consumer protection. So hopefully we'll get that in the next sort of couple of weeks, maybe month or so. But yeah, essentially it's been a really, really busy time. So we are now eagerly awaiting the release of the beta version of the Ofgem portal. So this was quite a topic of discussion at the webinar last week. That's actually due to be released on the day that we're recording today. So it's
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
which is quite good timing. I mean, we're obviously filming this in the morning, so we haven't seen anything yet, but due to be released today. So it is quite timely, really, us having this conversation. But yeah, other than that, the developments we're seeing pretty much sort of in the sector with clients that we're working with, everyone's really quite, kind of stepping up a gear now on this journey towards compliance. So we're seeing really, really good work within the sector and yeah, a lot of development across the sector in sort of getting preparation for this deadline next January. So yeah, January 27th.
Hmm.
So it's really busy, which is great.
Yeah, it is busy. I imagine for housing providers, it's maybe a bit, yeah, might feel like a bit much, but I suppose that's why
Yeah,
we're here talking about this, isn't it? Is to sort
yeah,
of get that organized a little bit. Okay, what to focus on
exactly.
first. So, I mean, you've touched on it there, but like maybe we could just talk about, why is it so important this year to get the priorities in order at this
Yeah,
stage compared to any
absolutely.
other year?
I think because this year is really it's known as being this big kind of preparation year. And I think time is really going quite quickly. I mean, we're already nearly in May now, and social housing providers and the wider sector have until January of next year. So, we're only about 9 months or so off now. And I think the deadline will be upon us, registering with the Ofgem portal. I think what is really key in my opinion as well in terms of getting organised and things like that, and maybe where you'll see the biggest change in day-to-day operations for providers is going to be this reporting aspect that we obviously touched on quite a lot in the webinar. And there's about 40 to 50 different set of data metrics that will need to be reported on. And I think that area of the portal obviously opens in October. I think because there are such a large number of metrics, and particularly ones that social housing providers will not have had to have report on before, and they never really have thought about that data in that kind of way of reporting that up to a regulator. I think that really is key in just getting organized and getting prepared on what you need to know. I mean, looking at complaints, for example, generally they've never had to split out heat network complaints. separately from the wider complaints and wider housing complaints. This is obviously now something that they need to be able to do. I think there is just going to be so much change to the way social housing providers approach and manage heat networks going forward. And the key to that is to be prepared. So this year is why it is so important that you are getting preparation plans in place and compliance plans in place and not finding yourself on the back foot, because it will be January before we know it. And I think just having that awareness and appreciating that, yes, there is going to be a big challenge ahead, being able to focus on preparing for that business change, because day-to-day operations will change. There's not really any two
Yeah.
ways about that. And I think that's why that's so key in this year, is not just focusing on hitting that deadline, but preparing for the business change as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure, for every housing provider that's going to look a little bit different. It depends what
Hmm.
they've got going on and yeah, for how their priorities are going to look. But I mean, generally speaking, then let's take a step back. How can they start to approach this?
So I think what really is key and what really is fundamental is to actually know what your compliance position is now. So it may not be, we're not expecting you to be compliant with absolutely everything, but just knowing what your compliance is now and today, and also actually what you've got in your portfolio. So how many heat networks you've got, how many district networks, what ones of your heat networks have got individual meters installed, which ones haven't, just knowing and understanding that portfolio, and also knowing and understanding who your key stakeholders are, whether that be internal teams that are involved, external teams that are involved. I think that, knowing that as a baseline and being able to build on that is really important. You need to be open and transparent with your team, knowing where your gaps are, what you might be struggling with. I think these are such new regulations for social housing providers that it's inevitable there will be gaps. You will need to change your processes. There are going to need to be new policies that you need to implement. And I think once you know that foundation and your baseline, you know your position, you know your portfolio, you can just work and build on that. And I think, just to sum that up, yeah, just the knowledge and the understanding is really key to help you build that compliance plan and work on that and work through the different work streams that is going to come out of that. And, just ensuring that you've got, you understand that position and you are building your way to compliance for January.
Mentioned there about data, which is obviously going to be massive, complaints and, compliance more broadly. I wonder how can they approach this then, just in terms of the different areas, maybe like prioritizing the different areas around this financial year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to look at it kind of strategically and breaking things down into the categories and focus on getting those kind of basics right for each section and then
Mm.
building from there. I think let's look at customer service, for example. How can you ensure that you are still delivering this kind of excellent customer service that you want for your residents and your customers of your heat network, whilst you are still on this learning curve yourself? So, maybe breaking it down for those customers, making it easier to understand, sharing your knowledge with those customers, because these are new regulations for them as well, of course. So just being very clear and transparent, ensuring that they know what it means for them. We spoke quite a lot on the webinar, potentially looking at kind of an FAQ document for the customers, ensuring that the language that you're using is jargon free. I think especially in the heat network sector, when there's a lot of abbreviations. There's a lot of jargon language that we all use. And I think if you're looking at it from the outside, people will be thinking, okay, this does actually sound like a different language. So just
Mm.
breaking it down, ensuring you're being clear and transparent. And that's obviously something that Ofgem are going to look for, ensuring this kind of really good communication with your customers. I think as well, we've touched a little bit on complaints, but looking at complaints, how can you avoid complaints in the first place? So, it does link back obviously to that customer service aspect, but also, we see a lot of firefighting in managing heat networks rather. So moving away from firefighting and start to approach things with a bit more of a proactive approach. So, for example, if you know you've got heat networks where potentially there are problems, you can kind of foresee that and getting sort of planned preventative maintenance in place and ensuring that those are, you know, you may not see kind of the bigger problems that may happen in the future, for example. You can also look at metering and billing as well. Do you know if all of your meters are working, for example? Are you billing accurately? Does your metering and billing provider know the exact kind of customer service that you are expecting for your customers to receive from them as well? I think once 40 to 50 metrics does sound like a massive task in terms of the reporting, but I think once you actually break it down into sections, I think it always makes allows you to see the bigger picture a lot clearer essentially. It can be quite overwhelming. And we did see that. We did a bit of an interactive piece on the webinar, and a lot of people were kind of saying, we said, what are three words that you feel, how you're getting prepared with regulations, how you feel about regulations? And overwhelmed was one of the bigger ones that came
Mm.
up from that interactive piece. And yeah, absolutely it can, because these are brand new regulations, and social housing providers have never really had to think of heat networks as a separate area of the business, and now they do. They are now a regulated energy provider. And I think especially when it's not a subject really that you do know day in, day out, it is very overwhelming. So breaking it down into those sections will, will really help. I mean, it's not to say that there isn't a mammoth task ahead for social housing providers to learn all of these regulations, especially when there's so many other regulations that social housing providers have to contend with, and there seems to be new regulations for them, every few months or so. Um, but yeah, I think this is when you're breaking it down, you're prioritizing, what areas of data you may not have had before and things like that. But yeah, I think breaking it down will help you see it a lot clearer, because 40 to 50 it does sound very overwhelming. Once you break it down, there'll be things that you've already got in place, definitely. And then
Yeah.
other things that, okay, we don't. It's a challenge, but everyone likes a challenge, don't they?
Of course. Yeah, and I really like that tip about, when you've split it out, you've broken it down into different
Mm,
areas, just making sure that you've got the basics covered off of each
yeah,
one, like rather than trying to go in depth on one whole area first, like yeah, to look at it more like across the board.
yeah,
And then once that's done, go back and sort of
yeah,
improve and yeah, work towards like um what would we call it, like the best practice once you've
yes,
got the sort of
yeah,
basics covered off. Yeah, 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 brilliant.
yeah. Get the
Okay.
basics right, and then everything follows from there, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, no, really important. Okay, thank you. And yeah, so you've mentioned their reporting, obviously
Mhm.
registration, the registration
Yeah,
portal on the horizon. So that's really, I think, at the forefront for a lot of housing providers at the moment,
absolutely.
wondering how they're going to go about doing this registration because it's all new, maybe
Yeah.
a little mysterious for some. So yeah, any tips on just how to go about getting organised with that? I mean, presumably that's going to be like quite a priority for housing providers this
Absolutely,
year.
yeah. I think first things first will have to be understanding exactly what is required from you in terms of the
Mm,
registration. I mean, Ofgem have published the kind of information that will be required, and I think my first lot of advice would be, if you don't know, then get to some bedtime reading, take a look exactly what may be expected of you. In terms of the registration, it's just I've kind of mentioned on it. It's just really knowing your portfolio and knowing which bits of your stock have to be registered essentially, and just getting that very basic information. Working around your teams. A lot of our clients and a lot of social housing providers use third party operations and maintenance contractors, metering and billing contractors. They are aware of these regulations as well, and they'll be able to support you. But I think the very basics is knowing exactly what is expected from you. I think as what is really key for something for us to mention here now is, we are aware of this task that is ahead of providers. So we have got support in place where we can absolutely assist. So there are lots of different packages that we can offer. So we can look at it as a package as a whole, for example, or we can offer training on the portal, for example. We can do a project for the SMRI element of the Ofgem registration. We can also help you look at those data gaps. So, where there is information that you don't know about your portfolio, for example, we can go in and we can do a deep dive and help you get any kind of sort of data that you are struggling with, for example, for your heat networks. And then, of course, we can help you actually register with Ofgem as well. So there is support out there. And I think if you are struggling, January will come around very quickly. And I think it's not something to delay and think, oh, that's next week's problem. That's next week's problem. I think really start now, because inevitably there will be things that you will struggle with. So there is support out there, and especially from us.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. Well,
Yeah.
we'll make sure the link is below this episode. Everywhere this
Yes.
episode is, we'll have a link to that as well. So I'm sure that's going to be very welcome news, that there's this kind of end-to-end like
Yeah.
support throughout the whole thing. So that's
Absolutely.
amazing. I've checked that SMRI, significant managerial responsibility or influence.
Or influence. That was it.
Yeah, there we go. Because
This is
goodness
what I was
knows.
saying. There's so many abbreviations
So
in
many.
heat networks.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So, is there any other reflections you have on the webinar or Heat Networks getting organised for their priorities for this financial year, or anything else you wanted to cover which we haven't spoken about already today?
I think the key really is, and I will push this home, is just knowing your compliance position and knowing your portfolio as the first area, and then look into, you know, knowing when the deadlines are, especially. I think we bang on a lot about those in our webinars, but it's really important that you are aware of the deadlines. And then just understanding that there is a big challenge ahead of you, getting your teams organized, upskilling your teams as well. There's loads of training that's out there. We are a registered training provider as well, so we can always assist, but ensuring that your teams are upskilled, they are aware of what is going on, and they're aware of the regulations. And it's going to be, all different teams are going to be affected within your organization. It's just really making sure getting that word out there about the regulations. There's a load of different things, but I think as well is just maintaining that good customer service aspect for your customers throughout this change. It's a change for them, it's a change for you. But yeah, I think just getting your basics right and then building on that. Yeah, there's a lot of priorities, but I would say that would be my biggest tip, just getting yourself organized and getting a plan in place.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, well, I think that's it for our episode today. So thank you very, very much,
Brilliant.
Millie. Thanks for
You're
sharing all
welcome.
your thoughts and all your tips there. Really, really helpful. And yeah, we hope this has been a useful listen for everybody. And if you do want any more information, of course, you can go to www.chirpyheat.com. And if you want to get in touch with the client relationships team, it's client.relationships@chirpyheat.com. Okay, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.